Oh, this is a crazy story. This is a crazy story. I honestly don't know where to start with this one. I guess I'll start by saying that getting distorted tones for in utero, or just in general, any distortion tones, have never really been hard for me. But what's become my absolute nightmare, my nemesis, if you will, has been getting the clean tones from in utero down. There's something so specific about in utero and its clean tones that have always baffled me, and I've never really been able to get quite right. And since I'm in the middle of building an IR pack and doing all these really cool things, I had to figure this out, which is part of why I've been gone for a long time. I had a lot of figuring out to do. I remember Steve Albini saying that there was a third amp used for in utero, he just didn't remember which. He said here, Kurt would decide which amp would be the main sound and which would be the overdub sound. So the Randall, the Quad, and one other amp, I forget which, would be done live. The other guitar part overdubbed. I don't recall there being a plexi. He did have a Mesa Boogie preamp and power amp as his live rig for touring. And we tried that out, but it sounded awful and we never used it. Okay, so here we go. There was a third amp used. But what was it? Because I've had the Quad forever in the Randall, and I've been trying so long to get the tones right with those, and it's just not working. It's not those amps. Now, Ernie was telling me that he built a Frankenstein amp, and that it actually made it to the in utero sessions, and apparently Kurt used it for cleans. He said, it started out as an old Marshall I pulled out of the dumpster at a music store. I had a repair shop in Spokane. There was also an amp tech who had a shop in the same store for a while. The amp came in and had a blown transformer, and the power section was pretty roasted. It sat on the floor for several months until one day it was gone. Apparently the owner would not return calls after he quoted him $200 to fix it, so the tech threw it in the dumpster, and it was sent out to in utero. But I also remember seeing this high watt at Mopop, sitting right there, and I always felt like, well, what's up with that high watt? And I asked Ernie, I said, I know this is out there, man, but is it a possibility Chris's high watt head could have been used too? I was referring to Kurt's guitar sound, and he had responded, very. He borrowed the Marshall to record the bass tracks, and afterwards said that's what he used. Although later when he donated his high watt to the museum here in Seattle, he stated it was used, so it's hard to know what was used for what. I spoke to Steve Albini by phone about it perhaps 15 years ago, and he sounded confused about the Marshall being used for bass, but did offer that there was one wired for no distortion used for clean guitar tracks. So one of those amps, either the high watt or Ernie's Franken amp, is actually the in utero clean amp. I just had to find out which. So I got the bright idea. Pretty sure you know what it is. I found a high watt. The only problem is it was all the way in San Francisco. It's for a really good price, and I knew I couldn't pass it up. I'm in Seattle, that's like a 13-hour drive, but I knew I had to get that high watt. The guy wouldn't ship it. I asked like several times, please dude, will you just ship this high watt? And he was like, no, I'm sorry, it's gonna break if I do that. I don't feel comfortable. If you want it, just come get it. So I asked my wife if she wants to go to San Francisco. Oh. Want to go to San Francisco?
When?
I'm serious. Yes or no?
When?
I don't know. We'd have to plan, but are you down?
For how long?
One day. We knew the only way this was gonna work, the only way this IR pack would be just perfectly accurate, was we'd have to go get that high watt. So here we were, a super crazy tone-obsessed husband and a really, really supportive wife that understands how important guitar tone is and completely committed to going to San Francisco with me. So we got there. We were exhausted with no sleep.
How does it feel to sleep for 3 hours after being away for like 24?
I saw that high watt for the first time.
Excited? Excited?
Yeah, well, once we get back home, I take this to the studio and crank it. I couldn't believe it. I was there. I actually drove all the way there, and here I was with this high watt. Because besides in utero, I've always wanted a high watt. It's been a thing for me. High watts are amazing. So finally we made it back from Seattle, and I knew I could get this high watt in the studio. I could mic it up the way in utero was mic'd up, and I could finally have that tone. As amazing as that high watt sounded, and it was perfect, I loved it, I knew it wasn't right. Something about it just still sounded off. Which means Chris would have been right when he donated his high watt to Mopop about using it for bass. That means, yeah, that high watt was used for bass. Kurt didn't use it. Which left only one other possibility, Ernie's Frankenstein amp. I knew I had to build it. And Ernie had told me that Mojo Tone's Super Lead would be the best economical way to do this. So naturally, I ordered the kit. And Ernie was kind enough to share all the schematics with me and what he did to that amp to make it sound the way it did. And I'm so thankful that he did. And now I had everything that I needed. Out of respect for Ernie, I'm not going to share his mods or schematics or anything. But I will say when I started taking a look at the mods that he did, all this really started to make a lot of sense to me. So I built it. The bass structure of the amp is basically a super lead, 100 watt plexi, which is what he was talking about in that reverb interview. And then it just gets modded, like all the distortion gets neutered, basically, and you get a very unique tone. So I finished the build, but before I modded it, I had to see how it sounded at least as just a super lead. So I knew that the amp sounded like it was supposed to. It sounded like a super lead, so I went ahead and proceeded with the mods. And that was it. I knew I had finally found it. It was doing all the crazy voicings that I was trying so hard to get my other amps to do. This thing was just doing it effortlessly. It was such a specific sound, and fuck, I had it. The only difference I heard at this point now was like maybe mic placement and stuff, but I could tell it was that amp for sure. Another reason I knew that this amp was totally it was I literally hooked them all up and just played them back to back. Not only did the Franken amp nail the Wave Me tone, it nailed Sappy too. And before I was getting that with like a Sans amp pedal and doing a lot of weird things, but now it makes sense. He just was using that for cleans. That was the clean amp. Just sounds like that on its own. Now usually I'll say that amps don't matter very much. And honestly, I still feel like they don't. But in this case, I feel like it actually matters a lot. It's that last like 5% that I had been trying for so long to get. I've always been a firm believer in speakers and cabinets and those kind of things making a bigger difference. In which they do. That leaves us to the cab, this little 212 Soundtech cab that Kurt had. Through the Celestion 70s and the little tiny 212 cab, it sounded exactly like it. And for the 212 cab, I had to build it from scratch because Kurt's was really, really tiny, and you make a box small enough, it's gonna affect how it sounds. So I couldn't find a 212 that small, so I had to build one. Just comparing it to like a Bassman 212 here, you can see the size difference is totally different. Bassman cab's way bigger. So that's it, it was settled. The Franken amp. So all I gotta do now for this modified Frankenstein amp is get a case for it, like a head cab, and give it a name. Definitely not a Marshall. In fact, I think I'm gonna name it Ernie. It just totally makes sense in this situation. And Ernie, if you're watching this, sincerely, thank you. Because without you, I would have never been able to get this tone. Alright guys, there's one more thing that I want to do to send this video off. It's going to be an epic ending. We're going to go to Robert Lang Studios. Let's go. This is a Neumann U47. This is the actual microphone that Kurt Cobain sang into for You Know You're Right. Someone had twisted the connector, basically just completely off, and broke it. So I'm going to be taking this home to resolder it, give it a good look through, give it a clean bill of health. Just look at that. But this microphone, I don't even know how you would put a value on it. It's basically priceless because, well, there's U47s out there. There's not any except for this one that Kurt Cobain is singing into. So to me, considered more of an artifact. So it's going to be an absolute honor to fix this microphone and get it working. Oh, this is so much stuff I gotta load into the car. It's time to shut it down. Good night, studio.
Locked.
Alright, I got the U47 fixed. This is without a doubt the most incredible I've ever heard my voice sound just through a microphone. I remember Jesse telling me when I first went to Lynx, this is the mic that Kurt Cobain used to record You Know You're Right. So I guess there's some Kurt DNA on here somewhere. There's probably a lot of famous DNA on here actually. This microphone has been used on a lot of incredible records. And laughing at you, and they're laughing at you. Yeah, they're laughing at you. Hey, yeah, they're laughing at you. And I said, hey. Microphone test. I can't believe I just sang into the You Know You're Right mic. That's some wild shit, man.